We are so lucky today to have John Pierson for Dynamo Chats. Thank you so much, John. How's it going?
Doing good. Thank you for having me. Super excited to be on this series and just kind of hang out and catch up. It's really fun and something I think we all need. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. Just missing those conversations. We were chatting before when we kind of scheduled this about just missing the conversations. I don't think that we've chatted since AU. We figured, and so this
yep,
would be the perfect time for us to catch up, and not only that, for you to show me and the industry some of the cool things that you've been working on.
for sure. Yeah, that sounds awesome. And yeah, it's always fun hanging out at conferences or events and just hanging out after. Like when I started at Parallax, where I'm at now, we actually went to DC for a Dynamo presentation and we hung out like at a bowling alley thing for like two
Yep.
hours after the whole
Ate
group, and we were all just
pizza,
talking. Yeah,
bowled,
it was
or it was
awesome.
bocce. I think they had a bocce and
Yeah,
bowling. It was a lot
yep,
of fun. Yeah, Timon
yeah,
was there, the DC group.
it was
It was
really
a
cool.
lot of fun.
But yeah,
Well, one of the things that you in particular work on is Monocle, right? I mean, I know you have a few packages that you manage from the Dynamo Package Manager, but I think probably the most widely used or maybe the most widely worked on by you would probably be Monocle, right?
yeah. So Monocle's kind of interesting because I started out building Dynamo packages in 2015, and that was the rhythm package that I started building. I went to AU in 2014, learned about Dynamo, started building a bunch of graphs that I thought were useful, and started bundling those up into a package in 2015. So I think a lot of people know me from that one. It's open source on GitHub. It's in C sharp. So it's just all there. A few years ago, as a Dynamo user, and I think a lot of people can relate to this, you get frustrated with Dynamo quite a bit, like
Hmm.
a lot. So like you start typing things like all elements of category, and for whatever reason, it's not showing me the node I want. It's
Right, just because you
incredibly
have a few
frustrating.
additional letters.
Yeah, and I added category, which should
Right, you're
show
being
it.
more specific.
Exactly. So there's like constant things like this that we run into with Dynamo. And my specific use case was since I am a package creator and someone who works for a consultant, we send off Dynamo graphs with packages in it a lot. And until just recently, there was no way of knowing if I like drop a clockwork node on the canvas. There was no way of knowing what package this came from if I sent this to someone and it turned red or yellow. So that's kind of how it started, was frustration with Dynamo, and like I have a lot of respect for the Dynamo team. All those people on that team are awesome. They're all friends of mine, and we've hung out too, just like we were talking about earlier. But there are things that kind of miss the mark. So it started out with me trying to fix some of the stuff that was frustrating me. So like, yeah, whenever I started looking at custom package usage, we were working on things like how do we tell it which package it's from, and we were playing around quite a bit with just annotating the graphs. So I reached out to Rosell on the Dynamo team and I was like, hey, how do we start making stuff that like makes Dynamo read Dynamo, you know? And she was like, oh, you should start looking at view extensions in Dynamo. They're really cool and they're this new thing. And we're teaching a class in London on them at their user group. If you don't know, the Dynamo user group in London's like a huge group, and they're all geniuses. So they did like a whole workshop on view extensions there, and they recorded it, so I was able to kind of tune in and see what the deal was. With that, it was one of these very complex things to where we went from adding stuff to the sidebar of Dynamo, adding stuff up here in the ribbon. So in regards to my own journey, that was a big step from I started out doing Python nodes, similar to what you're teaching on your channel, Dana, to building C sharp nodes, and then it had to jump to something that was like an add-on to Dynamo now. So it was like a pretty crazy jump for me that was a little scary, if I'm going to be honest.
And why did you jump? Like why go from Python to C sharp?
Yeah, so from Python to C sharp, it's so kind of one of my goals was to start building Revit add-ins as well. And C sharp just always seemed kind of interesting to me. So I started learning that, and Marcelo actually showed me some of the zero touch stuff as well. I really like C Sharp because I'm lazy. So like Visual Studio does a lot of auto prediction for you. So it's pretty amazing when you're in there. And you can get some of that in Python too as well if you set up your environment correctly. But like you're typing and it's just predicting it. It's just so nice. And then you compile it. And nowadays I build Revit add-ins as well that we sell and things like that. And they're in C Sharp and they're compiled to plugins for Revit. So it's just kind of part of the journey. I still like coding in Python all the time in Dynamo though, because it is so quick. You just drop a node and you start hacking away at it and see what happens. But yeah, those kind of went from the Iron Python implementation in Dynamo to C Sharp with zero touch nodes within Dynamo. And then one of these frustrations led me to view extensions, which are in C Sharp as well. So kind of interesting. Uh, View extensions are considered kind of like a little of a crazier thing to create. So back when I was working on the package stuff, that was very clear how difficult they were to make. So when I started working with it, I like right away like started screwing around with how things work. So I met with the Dynamo team about package management, telling them some of my gripes. So kind of like a little gripe session. I was like, we need to tell people where packages come from, what packages these nodes come from. And they were like, well, it's very hard to build. It'll never exist in Dynamo or something along those lines. So when I built it, I just went ahead and like was really goofy with it because I was like, what it's doing is really cool, but what it looks like is very silly and just kind of dumb. So it's kind of like my nod to them regarding how they said you couldn't manage your packages in that way.
Well,
Uh,
and I will say, I say the package usage doggy. Is it the doge? The
Yeah, Carl told
doge?
me, Carl Storms told me, Doge once, and that stuck. So that's like
Doge.
what I've always thought.
Because
It's
Carl
come
and
with a
I
few
had a debate
times.
on this, I think on one of our many things that we chat on. And yeah, I believe both of us say it differently. And Bill, of course, wanted to throw in a third. So, but I
Exactly, it's
like
like
that.
the GIF
It
and GIF.
adds, yeah, exactly. But I add
Yep,
that kind of adds to the fun of the
for
tool,
sure.
right?
Yeah, and when I was building it, I like right away started screwing around with adding this little meme in it and Comic Sans and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, it was a really cool tool that like does some crazy stuff, right? It does all these annotations for us, and if you move the node around, it'll update, and it'll do it for a whole graph as well. So it was one of like the first things I built just to make sending Dynamo graphs better. Um, and it's just kind of funny that it is this kind of tool. And then even something else I added along the way of building this tool was like depending on the month it is, this guy will change what he is too. So keep an eye out for that too.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
was
that's
about
kind
to
of where
say
it started.
that's a new looking doge there.
For sure. And I think even if I do it again, it should probably be different. Yeah. So
Oh, that's so cool.
yeah. So if you do it around certain months, I won't say which ones, it'll actually be different too. So keep an eye out. Just kind of fun with it. This is open source too. This specific portion of this tool. So yeah, it's kind of contributing back to anyone who wants to build okay tools, like I always say, right?
It's definitely a
Also,
tool I use very regularly with
for sure, it's
every
like
script that I have.
yeah, and if you're not telling people what packages you're using in your Dynamo graph, like you're not very nice.
Not
Like
only to
help
other
people out.
users, but to yourself, right?
Oh
Like,
gosh,
what if
for
you get a
sure.
new version of Dynamo and you want to open that in the new version of Dynamo? You have no idea.
Yes, we've seen that a lot to where people install like a fresh Revit install and it comes with Dynamo now. And all these add-ons are blank and they're like, man, I don't know where any of these came from. It's nice to annotate them in a way that stays with the file. This stays with the file like forever until you delete it. So it's like these are notes in Dynamo. So like if you hit Control W, you can add a note, of course. So it's like the lowest way to do this. There's other advanced ways like auto download packages from the package manager and all this madness. At the end of the day, I just wanted like the equivalent of a sticky note on the screen, telling you, hey, this is where this came from. So that's kind of where that kind of happened, and the whole like meme, the Doge thing, it's fun. A lot of people laugh at it. I think AU 2019 in the Dynamo classes. I loved seeing this on every screen in the class for Carl's presentation, I think, and Jason's, Jason Boning. So it was like, it's kind of funny. You're at like this professional conference and we see this guy on all the screens. So it's kind of like, I made it. No, I'm just kidding. No, but yeah, it's really fun. And for every person that has fun with it, there are people who have less fun. So we do have like the boring mode too, as well. So like a little more professional. So that way you don't have this dog on your screen when your boss walks by when we were back at the office, you know. This one has more features as well, like node counts. So if you start adding nodes, it'll actually update those counts too. Um, and then it also has a keyboard shortcut. So like having stuff that's really interactive for users, like I want the user experience to be great. If you hit Control Shift P, it'll actually do it too. So a lot of the tools like I add to Monocle are partially because people have these ideas, but it's also just experimentation for other tools I'm building. You know, like keyboard shortcuts are something people are super familiar with in our industry, so adding them to tools is pretty fun too. But yeah, so this one's the boring mode if you really didn't want to see the big picture of the Doge as well. Other than that, like that's kind of where it started. That was back like 3, 4 years ago when I added that. And then it just kind of took off from there. Like Monocle has a bunch of menu items in here. One of the ones that we were talking about, I think before we started recording, was the search, or we did it right at the beginning. The Dynamo Search, I've spent a lot of time deconstructing it just because I'm so frustrated with it. And I know that if you start typing, it's loading all these icons for you. It's also only loading like 50 results no matter what letter you type. That way they can try to make it faster. And I know all this because it's open source. I've had people go like, "How do you know that?" And you can look at Dynamo source code. They're also searching everything about a node. So like if we just place a node, when Dynamo searches, it's searching the node name, um, the node description, the node category, and I think all the inputs and outputs at the same time. So the reason you get so many weird results is because they're eating the whole pizza at once. You know,
Mhm.
they're not picking how many slices they want first. So when I saw that in the repo for Dynamo, I was like, oh, we need to give users a choice there of what they're searching. Because we just search everything, we're going to get results that just kind of tick people off. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, we did this earlier, and I finally see category. And then there's a billion other nodes named all elements of category as well. So like, for a new user, that's frustrating. So that's kind of where simple search came from too. Is I may be someone who's been using Dynamo for a few years, but I definitely empathize with our users who are new, who you tell them search for this node, and they start searching, and they right away think they did something wrong because they can't find it. That's like a really crappy place to be whenever you're trying to
Right.
learn something, is to feel bad that someone else next to you got it and you didn't. So I like to have fun with these tools, but at the same time, I like to try to relate it back to where I started even with these tools.
It also
So
makes
like,
it super hard to teach, right? Like something
oh,
that
for
should
sure.
be a non-issue, that you shouldn't have to teach somebody how to search a library. You now have to take 3 steps to search, right?
Exactly.
It's
And then you,
like,
yes. And if you're in like a lab setting and someone has a different version of Dynamo, the search might work differently. So it's like, it is one of those things that we're all used to searching. Our whole life is searching for data these days, you know, and we're all pretty good at searching. And then you get in something like this, and it's just showing you results that are like not great. So that's kind of where this came from for sure. And then we have the option in here to search by the node name, the full name of the node, which includes like the package name a lot of the time. We can exclude custom packages, or we can include the description if we really want. So this is kind of how our search works. In newer versions of Dynamo, you can undock this. I'm in Revit 21, so you can't. But once you click on it, that same interaction happens where it'll place a node for you. I think if you hit enter, it will too. Yeah. So And
And
I
is there a
think,
way to get, I guess not, because it's a little bit of a separate extension, but to get the information at least in terms of where that lives in the library?
yeah, so that is not in our tool, like this little tree view.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that one's not in our in this tool specifically.
Which maybe isn't
Mostly,
even necessary. The whole reason I teach that is because things are impossible to find. And so being able to
yeah,
find where groupings live together, you end up learning 30 new nodes because you would have never been able to search for it and just going to the library. But
for
maybe this
sure.
way you don't even need to be in the tree because things just come up when you search for them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So like I like the tree view and breaking it down because it gives you logic. So like
Hmm.
Revit, selection, here's
Hmm.
how to collect things. Um, in this tool, I want it to be really fast. So that's why it
Right.
doesn't have icons. It doesn't have anything that makes it look any different because we're just wanting to search like this. That being said, we probably could add some of that or implement our search stuff into the default.
Or have an option
So
for the column, maybe, to just
yeah,
tell you the root of where that thing lives in the library.
yeah, very true. So like, and then right now, since this is docked, I can scroll around and see kind of where it comes from. So Revit dot selection,
Hmm.
in that case, but it's not great because we are bound to this width in older versions of Dynamo. In newer ones, you could just undock the whole darn window.
Right.
Um, Other great things. So like, I built this a little while back, just being frustrated with search, and one of the users of the tool is like, I'm frustrated, I have to click in it. So like that added to, you can do Control F to go to the search as well. So when you do that, it'll place the node. You can do whatever you want. And I hit enter, so I did the first one. But Control F will go into that find mode and clear the selection for you. So if you have a big selection or a big text, it'll clear it too. Yeah, so that's kind of where that came from too. This is one of the ones we see used the most, I think. So much that even in the Monocle menu, you can go to a beta feature and just replace the default search with ours. So that's kind of in there too.
Wow, that's very cool.
Um, I don't use this one as much because I do like to see the menu with the tree, the collapsible tree. So admittedly, I don't use it this way a whole lot, but I know a lot of people do. So it's kind of one of those funny
And that
ones.
probably could be written into the XML if you wanted all users to see it that way, right?
Yeah, I
So
think you could
you just
probably like have that.
all your new Dynamo users when they go in there, they're not fumbling through this search or have to pull up the Monocle search. It automatically defaults to the Monocle search. So that's a decent idea,
For
actually.
sure. The other scary part with building tools, and people will know this as they start to build graphs, is like the more stuff you build, the more you're like, man, I hope it keeps working. You know what I mean?
100%.
You're like,
Especially when a new version of Dynamo drops and you're like, oh God, it's gonna break.
exactly. Or a
There's
new
no
Revit
way.
version. Yep.
Yes. A
So
new
it's
a new
like,
category of elements.
oh gosh, yes. And that was like, that's something we deal with a lot because I'm a BIM consultant, to where we'll send graphs and they'll stop working between versions or something, and it's like, oh my gosh. Categories is a great one. So like, we'll use a default search for this. Um, Categories is great because we love this node, right? Like, you've shown this node on your videos as well, because collecting elements, well, I am guilty of using the right click search a lot, so there is that.
I
Um,
do too. Well, and I think once you get to know those things, they just become muscle memory, right? Like the
exactly.
elements dot get parameter, I know to type that.
Yeah, once you
You
start to learn
know?
it, it's like second nature. So that's another thing
Exactly.
to keep in mind when you're training people too, is it's easy for you to say element get parameter value by name or whatever, and it's like, no, it's element dot get,
Dot.
and no spaces in that one.
An
So
element, not elements.
yeah, exactly. So it's one of
So
those things you get so
particular.
used to it. Yep. And even for that searching, the right click search, there was a little bit where Monocle would override that one too, but we got to a point where they were clashing, to where you'd start typing in the Monocle search and then the out of the box search would pop forward. And it was like, it got crazy. So I was like, okay, we can't mess with the right click search. That's theirs. So, um, or shift double click, I think still does it, or is it no? Yeah, shift double click still does search too
Oh, that's a
without the
new
little
search for
menu.
me.
Yeah, if you don't want
Search.
to see all this, you can
Oh,
alt shift double click.
interesting.
And
Okay,
even that one's
shift.
acting a little odd. Yeah. Yeah, so that one's another type of search as well. But yeah, that's kind of thinking on that though, like the categories is one we use all the time, but between Revit versions or Revit files, depending on how many categories are in the model, up until I think recent Dynamo, this can change. So like if I have wall selected in Revit 19 and then I load this in Revit 21 and I had two more categories above it, I'd probably be on common edges, whatever the heck, you know.
Mhm.
Um, that's another one that all along we were like, okay, we're going to stop doing that and we're going to do, if I could type, category dot by name, do
Mhm.
walls. Gotta do it inside of quotes. So like as someone shipping off a graph to someone, this is the best way to do that. But that led to another frustration with Dynamo for us at Parallax specifically. I don't like typing this all the time. And other nodes have like that node decode option whenever you right click. But we'll notice none of these do. So that was one thing that it's like, man, node decode's great, but we can't do that with this. So in Monocle, we actually kind of have our own little way of doing that as well. So inside of the toolbar, we've added shortcut icons for some of these quick things that just make life easier. So like instead of me wasting my time typing all this is predictable. We can now
That's
convert those
amazing.
as well. So um,
Even when you get it from somebody else, like that would be something
yes,
that before when I'm cleaning up a script and doing the custom package doggy and all of these things, that would be an amazing thing to do.
yeah, it's you
Add it to
just
your
clean it up.
checklist.
Yeah, so yeah, we could start to have it to where you have these cleanup things for sure. And
Hmm.
like sending a graph with this, I know I want it to be walls when I run this graph. That's what you're getting. If you want it to be a drop down someone can change, just leave it a drop down, of course, and
Right.
make it an input. But in our case, like we're using that node a lot. And it also works for element types. So that one's a little weirder. So like if we were to do like, let's do area. This is a node that we use quite a bit too for setting element types like wall types and things like that. Once again, no node decode option. But if we do that, it'll actually do the full. This one's a little bit harder to remember than category by name.
Definitely.
And what this does is it actually finds it inside the Revit API for you, and now it's hard coded. So this one's a one that we use quite a bit, and I had to look this up every time. Like every time I had to do this, I was like, I have to look this up and figure out what to do. And someone on the Dynamo forum actually revealed that this is how you do this, and I was like, holy smokes, we're adding this to the tool. So that's one that we now convert as well. Um, just out of frustration of that change between Revit and Dynamo versions of not keeping the category. That broke a lot of graphs for us and ticked us off quite a bit. So um, another one of those little things.
Yeah,
Other,
I think all my sheet scripts became shaft scripts in
oh
that
yeah, for
in
sure.
that new version of
And
Revit.
they still work perfectly, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Yeah,
I have the exact same parameters.
yeah, for sure. So it's one of those things like we're building stuff to kind of share and hand out. So this kind of helps with that kind of stuff, and we're always adding features like this to it when people are frustrated. Another one that like really bugs me is like if you have like let's see, let's copy this and do doors. So like we'll have a lot of graphs even at Parallax that we have to collect a lot of categories, right? So we'll collect these two. And if you're a Grasshopper user, you know that you can just hold down control, I think, and connect multiple, right? Something like that. And Dynamo we can't. So like a lot of the tools I kind of get inspired by other tools. So Grasshopper's one, like I'm not a pro Grasshopper user or anything. I'm not advanced at it or anything like that. But I admire how their UI is, and I really like the work they do. So a lot of that stuff will influence some of the tools I add as well. And this user interaction of having to search for it used to be list.create, by the way, and now it has a space. Having to do this and then connect those is like super annoying. And then it also, it does segment or stack the list down, so you have to flatten it and all that. That interaction sucks when you have like 20 categories that you're targeting for a workflow. We have workflows at Parallax where we're like deleting subcategories from models and things like that. And having a node that's like this long that I have to go through and connect just drives me crazy. So another one of the tools that was kind of born out of frustration recently was this little shopping cart, and it'll actually combine them all for you into a list
Wow.
create, and then you can use that from there. So that was one that came up recently, to where it's like, man, how do we do this where we control these, you know? And it does them in order. So if we were to have these stacked this way, it'll actually still go in order. And you can really go crazy with this where you just keep on adding create nodes too. So that one's kind of fun too. It's one of those things that other tools do it, so we kind of wanted it right within within Dynamo. Um, yeah, a lot of other things that I kind of just glaze over are these little in canvas tools. I'm kind of OCD when it comes to aligning all of these, so like
It's wonderful seeing you use your own tools. And I will say
yeah,
I am incredibly OCD about my scripts as well. So that's a
for
huge
sure.
time saver.
Yep. So that like, always having to align like this to where you let's pretend that doesn't exist right now. Align. Oh, I missed it. Top. That'll drive you crazy and you won't do it. If it's not easy to do, no one's going to do it. So we got to make it easy to clean these things up for people. So having it right in Canvas, that is something that Grasshopper already does. Their tool's called Mr. Sparkle. That's a Simpsons reference, and it makes your graph sparkly, right? Um, in our tool, it's called, what the heck is this called? In Canvas alignment widget, something boring. Yeah. So in Canvas, you can turn it off if you really want, but I mean, I've never turned it off. And it has all those different alignment options. The other thing our tool does, or Monocle does, I'll actually copy these, is aligning groups is another thing. Like I like the group nodes too, and going to alignment and I'll go to top. It doesn't do what you think it does. Um, it does something way worse. It aligns everything inside the group.
Oh
So that's
no,
one that's
yeah.
like not great. And like, ask me how I
That's
know that that
dreadful.
happens, right? Like, yeah, it definitely got me a few times. So I think we get an undo. Yeah. So one thing Monocle does is it will actually, I'll have to end up doing it in the ribbon, but it will align groups as well. So like trying to get those groups perfect, instead of zooming in, you can just align them. And it won't mess up the insides of your group, which is nice. So yeah, that's another tool. They're in the ribbon too for things like groups, or if you don't want the in canvas one. Additional things that that little in canvas alignment does is the color coding. So this UI, I gotta give a shout out to my wife Vanessa. She helped me make this UI because I wanted it to be clean and not crazy and not a meme, you know. So she helped me out with this little eyedropper tool and kind of figuring this out. So we kind of worked on that one like after hours one day, like figure out what UI we want it to look like. So that's kind of fun. So yeah, you hover and then you can actually start to color code as well. Those aren't hard coded. Another thing over building tools and time building stuff for people that I've learned is give people options to customize. So those colors are actually controlled in this window. So if I were to change like any of these and then I highlight, it'll actually be driven from that UI. So this UI is kind of your master area to edit these. And then if I like make that a different text, it'll actually take that on as well. I think I might have to close it though. So if we do, yeah. So that's kind of how you drive that custom color grouping. If you really like nerding out on editing XML, there's XML settings in Monocle's extra folder to add more. So that's an option too for you. So always give people choice is nice. And then another funny thing is like you can actually assign a no color, just transparency, to groupings in Dynamo, which is kind of cool. So like this has no color at all and it's grouped. So that's kind of fun. It's just a hex color that you can use. Don't go
I
too
find those are
crazy, I
nice of
guess.
like groups in groups with, yes, definitely do not get crazy with the groups in groups. But when you
Yeah.
have something doing, that's something kind of a greater picture, I don't know, sometimes it is nice when you're more complex scripts that have groups
Yeah,
within groups. And so the transparent is really nice for that.
for sure. And that's like another good point is like groups and groups aren't doable like with the out of the box grouping. So like you could do it if you edit the file, but if you like select all these and I were to hit Control G, it won't group them. But Monocle actually will let you do like an overall group and then subgroups. So it's kind of a weird realm to get into. Um, I'm not advocating for people to do that. So like if you do it, it's at your own risk, but you can.
Definitely. And sparingly if you do it.
Exactly.
Have
So
a good
I've done it
reason.
before.
Have a good reason for sure.
Exactly. And like it shouldn't break anything major. The worst thing that might happen is you can't get to something behind something. But yeah, just kind of be a little careful with what you're doing with those. So it's kind of interesting. You can actually also, I'm gonna get off on tangents now. You can actually like hit the Windows key and then semicolon. I think you could put emojis in these things. I think. Ah, you have to do it over here. That's one too. I don't think it'll let me because of the WebEx, but you can actually assign emojis inside that form too if you really wanted. If you wanted your
That's really
group to not
cool.
be text. So that's an option too. And then I
Make it
think
more
in the
fun,
settings file
right?
you can yeah,
Like the Doge.
exactly. That's like another thing is if you're having fun, you're probably going to enjoy spending time building these things. Like under the like if you look at it like just in a nutshell, like we're annotating graphs and aligning stuff. Like that's not that exciting to some people. But when you're having fun with it and you're adding making the tools that are like very like dynamic and working with each other, it's pretty fun stuff. And then it influences a lot of your other tools or graphs or whatever you're building too, as well. So another one, just always kind of have fun with it. And then if you embed stuff in here that's really kind of Easter eggy, when someone discovers it, you're like, man, you really are checking out the tool. So I appreciate it. We used to do that a lot with Dynamo graphs when I was at an architecture firm. Is like embed like GIFs and like the little UI windows from data shapes and things like that. Um, yeah. So yeah, and I don't know too. Like, have you used all these tools in Monocle? Like,
Not all of them. And actually, I have to shout out to Alex at KPF. He showed me a lot of the grouping tools, to be honest,
awesome.
especially the customizations of the color groupings. That's major.
Yeah, and he's one who actually asked for that. So I think that was a user request from him and like four other people. But he was like, "Can we please customize the color groupings?" And for a long time, I was like, "No, I like the colors I picked." And then I was like, "Okay, we'll give it to you." So,
Well, because
so
like you're saying,
definitely,
there's a whole bunch of different company standards, right? Like I'm not going to force you if you're at Smith Group to use my color groupings. If you're creating Dynamo scripts, I am happy. But if
exactly,
you did comply with my color groupings, it might make me a little happier.
for sure. Yep. And that's another thing. So like, I think for even the package usage, like if you don't want it to say custom package in the front, you can change that. So another like consideration is like different languages, right? So like sure we might like that it says background and everything, but if someone wants to change that, they can. So kind of nice to give people those options for sure, where it'll kind of scale in a different way too. Yeah. Other than that, there are some old tools within Monocle as well that have just kind of been left in there. There's that full align window. This is how align started out to where it was just a window of its own. Make it a little, I can't grab that toolbar because it's too small. So it started out to where it was in a little window that floated. That's how all the tools in Monocle started out. That's generally how view extensions work. But having this open all the time just like bugged me to where I always had to come over here. So I even got frustrated with my own tool and I was like, there has to be a better way. So that's when they were added to the ribbon. And then that's when I was in Grasshopper one day and I saw their alignment tools and I was like, oh, we should make something similar in Dynamo. So even frustrated with my own tools as well.
Well, just know
Um,
different ways that you can improve them, right?
for sure. Yeah, so it's one of those things. Just helping people make better Dynamo graphs, right? So like we've seen an adoption of Dynamo blow up over the years, and along with more Dynamo, we've seen more bad Dynamo happen, right? So helping people do better Dynamo is something that was high on my like priority list when I started going to AU and seeing more classes for Dynamo and things like that.
And hearing
Um,
that it's not just you that are super frustrated with some of these
yeah,
things,
for
right?
sure. So it's yeah, and then people are always having good ideas about like, oh, we need Dynamo to do blank. Like right now I have a request for notes because my tool won't align notes right now with other nodes or groups. So I have to add that. And that's something that someone noticed. They're like, oh, I like to use notes and I want them aligned. So we can do that too. Um, Within reason, like as long as it's doable within the host tool, like good ideas. But like up until Revit 22, for instance, we used to always have people saying like, I want to create ceilings with the API. And it's like, we can't just do that. It's not doable, you
Right.
know?
I
So
can't
that's
change
what
Revit.
it's another thing you start to learn is like what's possible and what's impossible, especially as a
Right.
Dynamo user. Everyone hears the can Dynamo do blank from someone. And if you hear that, you're in a good spot because people trust you. But sometimes you're in a bad spot because you have to tell them no. So um, yeah, it's kind of interesting, interesting the place to be. I'll just show a couple more things. Sticky notes. These ones are fun. So like if I wanted to save this like kind of on the fly between Dynamo graphs, I can. So I'll just leave that kind of floating, this little sticky note on the side and start a new graph. And that'll actually kind of persist between sessions, which is kind of nice. That
That
was
I did
one of
not
the
even know
yeah,
that
that was
it
one of the
persists between. That's amazing.
between graphs, not
Yeah.
Revit sessions.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
That's
cool.
understandable.
Had someone like that got really ticked off because they had like a whole Python script pasted in it, and they closed Revit and Dynamo, and then it wasn't there, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, like it's a post-it note, it's temporary, it's not like it's not a whiteboard with permanent marker on it, like temporary. So yeah, um, that was one of the first tools too, also born out of frustration of I can't copy between two Dynamo graphs, or at least you didn't used to be able to. Now you kind of can. It works most of the time. And then you can kind of stack them too. So this one's funny because it actually uses some logic to make them rotate differently as you stack them. So it's kind of interesting. And that's one of those things I got curious about rotating something in C# or in code, and just kind of got sidetracked. So yeah. And then if you right click on the X, you get like a little bonus. So
That's
yeah.
awesome.
So Easter eggs everywhere. We'll copy a few nodes real quick to show something else. Shopping cart it. Cool. So we're collecting a bunch of stuff. Another thing that we've started to notice is like everyone's probably received a Dynamo graph that whoever made it's very proud of, and that's great. But it has 500 nodes in it, and I think that's a good thing. That's sometimes it's a good thing depending on the graph. If you have a whole bunch of category by name nodes, that's okay. But that starts to kind of it's a little hard to digest when you get a graph like that. So I started playing around with things like figuring out if it's pretty complex or not. So this uses like just kind of a little metric to score it. And I think in this case it's regular nodes are 1 point. And if I were to place like a Python node, I think it gives it a few more points. I think that's a 5 pointer as well. So if you start adding more like Python nodes, it'll start to tell you that your graph's a little more complex, and we'll fire it back up. This one's a pretty new tool. And this little robot will actually like turn red when it's really bad. So like, yeah, you're a few Python nodes or code blocks. It kind of weights code blocks a little heavier too. Because if I'm a new user and I open this with a bunch of Python, I get a little bit scared. So yeah, he turns red when it's kind of a high score.
Ooh.
So it's like golf, right? Lower is better, right? That's how that works.
Yep, you
You're
want to
not
get
trying to
closer to
get the
par.
high score.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, that one's a This one's new, and I just pushed it to the package manager. It's not perfect. It was more of me messing around just to see how it is to weight these things. And these robots I learned about from Speckle. I'll have to like send you the link to share because I don't remember what it is right now. But they're unique per your IP address, so it's kind of funny because it's like a web thing. So it's unique for every person that opens it up. So it's kind of like quote generative, right? Which is pretty cool.
That is really cool.
So yeah, it's kind of neat. You can have your own custom robot that you made, right? That's assigned to you, which is kind of neat. Yeah, and I'll delete all these Python scripts because they're gonna give me anxiety. A lot of them. Um, yeah. Other than that, yeah, Monocle's one that like I still build rhythm. There's new nodes for 2022 in there actually for Revit 22. But
Some of
I
the new, basically some of the new interfaces and API, or what are some of the new things that
yes.
you're doing?
So you can create ceilings now in the API in Revit 22. I actually don't even have Rhythm installed, so that's kind of hilarious. Um,
That is actually really
yeah, so I'm
hilarious.
recording some videos that like have the specific packages loaded. So I uninstalled everything till right before we got on this meeting, and I didn't reinstall that. But yeah, it has ceiling creation, floor creation with multi loops, and then the viewport, the labels, you can move them
Oh,
around. So
yes.
yeah, it's kind of nice because like, and I can probably share the GitHub link too, just to share it.
And I will
Let's go to
share
the
it in
right
the
one.
description for sure.
Yeah. So like a good thing like Rhythm is in C sharp. Started out in Python, but it is open source. So if you go to the SRC folder and we can go to Revit 22, we'll go to elements and we'll go to viewports. So like a lot of this is pretty similar in Python as well. You don't have to do all this casting stuff in Python. So like shout out to Python that you just unwrap it. It's a little nicer. But this shows kind of how you can get like the length of the view title. So like in Python, you'd be dot label line length. If you want to set it, you set it to a length. Things like that. So you can come through here, start looking at all the different code, and use it however you want. You can use it in C sharp, the copy and paste mostly, or you can end up using it in Python if you wanted to. The ceiling nodes are a little more, I won't even want to say sophisticated, but confusing just because of how Dynamo is, because they have element binding. So if you create a ceiling and you update the sketch in Dynamo, it'll update the ceiling you created. So if you have hosted lights, they'll stay on the ceiling. So that was something really important with the addition of this node. Um, the custom package Crumple has these in Python as well. So if you just want a direct translation, you can look at his nodes just to kind of see too. But yeah, it's one of those things like I still build Rhythm. It's still one. I don't add a whole lot of new nodes unless they really interest me. So like the viewport one specifically really interested us at Parallax because having used Revit for a while and not being able to locate the viewport title is infuriating, and now we can. So we wanted to
I would
fix
say
that
it's
right away.
definitely the one I get the question about the most in terms of can
Yes,
Dynamo do, and the one that I have to say no.
exactly. And it's like we, as people at our firms, like the BIM champions or whatever you want to call yourself, we we're like, oh, we'll automate creating all these sheets and cartooning sets and all this. And then you start doing that in Dynamo. That's like a lot of people's first graph. And then you're like, oh, we can't locate the viewport titles. Ouch. So like right now, like when you would do something like that, it just wasn't fun because it's like, oh, I wanted to show this cool tool and now like, like kind of just fell because of these viewports. So that one really interested me, so that's why it's in there already as well. And Rhythm, I just generally build it to where it'll work on the latest Revit and Dynamo. Right now, I think it works from Revit 19 to 22 consistently as well. And once again, open source, all that good stuff. Disclaimer, all that, all that fun
60%
stuff.
of the time, is that what that says?
Yeah, it's a 60% of the time it works every time.
That's
Bonus
hilarious.
points for someone who knows what movie it's from. Just kidding.
No, I don't.
Oh no. I'll let someone comment on the video or
Yeah,
whatever to tell
and
you.
I
So I'll
won't
leave
Google
that one
it.
hanging. We'll wait for someone who watches this to comment it, say it's from blank, and then we'll be like, There it is. Um, yeah, so I mean, yeah, still build rhythm, still build. There's a package called Bang as well for warnings in Dynamo. That one, all the Dynamo team just absorbed all that functionality into Revit 22 Dynamo. So like that package will start to get less important because they kind of built that functionality in, which is awesome. But yeah, Monocle is one that like helping people build better Dynamo graphs is like really fun to me. So that's one that I think just kind of helps people continue to learn and build Dynamo better. And specifically in regards to some of the stuff you're showing, people are able to align all their stuff on the fly, and it's not doing all the work for them. It's just aiding them in their journey, their Dynamo journey, right?
Or
Um,
just being able to find that node to align it
for
or group
sure.
it.
Exactly. So yeah, as you're building stuff, just like being able to map out your logic is really important, even for the next person or for yourself, like you said. It also doesn't hurt whenever like it has some fun to it. So like anyone who knows like the Konami code too, you enter that in Monocle and it does something cool. So like it's up, up, down, down, left, right, B, A. Yeah, so that's kind of fun. A lot of stuff like that's embedded in these things. Sometimes I forget some of the junk I put in these files, but
Well, thank you so much for showing us. I am so excited to go and get the new versions, the shopping cart in particular, and the node to code
for sure.
advancements with Monocle are so cool. And I can't wait to start using those and showing them in my videos. So I'm going to
Appreciate it.
reference this video in many of my future videos because I'll be using Monocle.
For sure. Yeah, and yeah, it's on the package manager now. This scheduled like meeting like pushed me to get these two buttons finished. So let me know if you run into anything on them. Monocle's on GitHub as well, so you can report issues. And if you have any ideas, let me know too. But yeah, I really appreciate you inviting me to chat about some of the goofy stuff I'm up to and just catch up too. I think it's
Absolutely.
something, like I said, I think we all need to like catch up with each other more, and hopefully we all get back to uh, talking smack about Dynamo in person at events, right? I'm just kidding.
Absolutely. Absolutely. With them there.
There you go. That way
With them
they're there with
listening.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you don't
That way
feel
they
so
can
bad
feel
when
the
you're talking
grind.
bad about them when they're in the room. Well,
That's
thanks so
awesome.
much, John. You have a great
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. Thank you.